Self-driving cars may not be ready for prime time, but that doesn't mean the auto industry doesn't have something to fill in the gap. And a good example is this. It's Super Cruise, available as an option on the 2018 Cadillac CT6 luxury sedan. It builds on top of adaptive cruise control, which we've seen filter down through more and more affordable vehicles over the years. And what that basically does is use a combination of radar and camera sensors to keep you at a certain distance at a certain pace with the car in front. On top of that, automakers built in lane control, which use cameras to keep an eye on the different lanes either side of you and then keep you within those lanes as you drive. The big overruling factor, though, is that they're all driver assistance systems, and the idea being that you're supposed to keep your hand on the wheel, or at least keep it on the wheel very often. If you don't do it, the car will complain, and whether you have a Honda Civic with adaptive cruise, or whether you have a Tesla with autopilot, after a while it's going to complain so much it will turn the system off altogether. Now, Super Cruise does something different. It has the same adaptive cruise and lane keeping abilities, but as you can see, I'm not touching the wheel at all. And that's because it uses a mixture of high-resolution mapping data and high-resolution GPS to know whereabouts the road is coming up, and an attention monitoring system to make sure that I'm paying just enough attention to make this all safe. So the CT6 doesn't actually have a LiDAR laser rangefinder of its own. That's something that we're used to seeing at the moment on only expensive development self-driving cars. What it does have is a whole load of GPS data that's been gathered by Cadillac and its partners of highways and freeways across the US and some parts of Canada based on LiDAR data, and that's down to a 5-centimeter resolution. So even though the car doesn't have the LiDAR sensor, it does have that supercharged mapping data, you could say. And with it, and a high-resolution GPS sensor, which is between 4 and 8 times as more accurate as the GPS you'd normally find in a car, it means the CT6 with Super Cruise knows pretty much exactly whereabouts not only on the road it is, but within the lane. And now it can combine that data with the data that the cameras and the various other sensors and the radar see of the lane itself and the cars around it, and it will use that to basically keep the car going, turning as the turns happen, and all doing that without me touching the wheel one bit. Now you may be wondering, why don't I just leave the Cadillac CT6 to drive itself all the time if it's so good? And sadly the system isn't quite up to that yet. For a start, it only works on freeways and highways. Cadillac sent out teams to map the freeways and highways across the US and certain parts of Canada too, with 130,000 or more miles of data collected. Problem is, it only works on highways where it's divided, so there has to be a dividing barrier between you and the opposing traffic. It has to have certain set on and off exit points too, so it can't be a highway where anyone can pull on. And that's basically designed to limit the number of extraneous factors that Super Cruise has to deal with. There's much less chance of a pedestrian running out, for instance, or a car suddenly pulling in front of me. What that means is that if I pull off the highway, Super Cruise will turn off and I'll get all manner of flashing lights, all manner of alert sounds, and even the seat will vibrate to tell me that it's time for me to take control. The other big part of Super Cruise is the attention monitoring system. Now that works using infrared emitters built into the steering wheel up here, and a camera that's just in front of me down in front of the instrumentation. What that's doing is watching my gaze and making sure that I haven't nodded off, I'm not looking at my phone, I'm not generally paying insufficient attention to the road around me. And if I am paying insufficient attention, the car will try and get my attention. It will flash this green bar up in the middle, then it will go red and start flashing, and eventually it'll escalate up through various different warning sounds. I'll get alerts and cautions in the display, the seat will vibrate angrily, and then finally the system will turn off altogether, and I'll slow down within the lane, it'll put the hazard lights on, and it'll use the OnStar system to call some sort of help or assistance for me, just in case I've had a heart attack. There are some other limits too. It can't do automatic lane changes, for instance, unlike Tesla Autopilot. And if I indicate, the system will shut off, it'll wait till I've changed lane, it'll get a fix back on when I'm in the next lane, and then the green light will come back on, and that shows me that it's time for me to let go of the steering wheel again. It'll also not deal with unexpected occurrences, such as construction sites, for instance, or if there's some sort of change to the road. At that point, I'm expected to get back involved. Cadillac, when you buy a car with Auto Cruise, gives you 3 years of service. That's updates to the mapping data, and that all comes down over the air using the OnStar 4G connection. And for that reason, you need to have 4G enabled when you're driving the car. After that 3 years, there'll be a subsequent upgrade. The big question we have is, when we'll be able to get it on other cars. Right now it's standard on the top spec CT6. It's an option on the slightly lower spec, which costs you about $5,000, including some other added tech stuff. But There's no sign of it on any other Cadillac model, or indeed any other model in GM's range, and that seems like a missed opportunity because actually Cadillac Super Cruise is really good. There's something a little unnerving about it when you first turn the system on and let go of the steering wheel, but as you can see, I've been driving along for quite a few miles now without any concern whatsoever. As long as you're paying attention to what's around you, the car pretty much handles itself, and you just need to be ready to take control if something goes awry. Is it better than Tesla Autopilot? Right now you've got quite a few choices if you want some sort of advanced adaptive cruise control technology. Though, while Tesla may call it autopilot, that doesn't mean that the car is actually just going to drive itself. It'll take over some of the responsibilities in certain situations, but just like Super Cruise, at times you're going to have to weigh in and you always need to stay alert. This is only a level 2 system, just like anything else on the market, which means that the driver is still responsible legally, technically and morally, just in case something goes wrong. I'm not going to say this is necessarily better than Autopilot. Autopilot works on more roads, not just the highways that Cadillac's limited Super Cruise to. But I do love the idea that I can keep my hands off the wheel, and that's by design, and I don't need to worry about putting them back on whenever I'm on the freeway.